Welcome back to Northwest City Politics in the Know with Juanita. We're glad you're joining our show again this week. We're always happy for people like you, people who are interested in what's happening in our cities. If you haven't watched us before, every week we'll have someone from one of the 9 cities in CCX's viewing area to come on and tell us about what's happening in that particular city, what are some of the future things that are going to happen, so you'll be up to date and know what's happening in the area. And if it's your city, pay particular attention if there's some issues that really resonate with you. Take down their phone number and their email and be in contact with your mayors and city council people about issues that you're concerned about. And tonight we're going to be dealing with Plymouth. I'm very happy to have Mayor Jeffrey Wosje come on.
Thank you, Juanita.
It's been a long time.
It has been.
So you've been on a little bit before, but it's been a long time, so we're happy to have you back again.
Last time I was on your show, I was actually running for mayor.
Right.
In the middle of a campaign.
And now you have all kinds of experience.
Yeah, it's nice to be back. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. I asked you to think about to introduce yourself out to our wider audience, because people in Plymouth will know quite a bit about you, but some of the other people might not. So if you just give a little bit of information about your time in Plymouth.
Sure, yeah. So I moved into Plymouth in the year 2000. I grew up in Golden Valley, graduated from Robbinsdale Armstrong High School, so which of course is in Plymouth. So I've been on the west side my entire life. And we moved into Plymouth, and it was in 2008 I took a job working for a bank that was located in Plymouth. So it was the first time in my career that I had actually lived and worked in the same community. And so I just wanted to get more involved in the city, in the community. So I joined the Rotary Club. I knew Councilmember Johnson, so I reached out to her and said, is there anything I can help with on the city? And she encouraged me to apply for one of the city committees. And so because I had worked downtown previously, they put me on the transit committee. So Plymouth has its own bus system, Plymouth Metrolink. And so I was part of that citizen committee that helped with what needed to be done and input for the bus system. So I was on that for a year. The second year I was chairing it. The third year I was chairing it as well. And then our council member at that time from my ward, Kathleen Murdoch, resigned. And so she retired. And so when that happened, I got encouragement from some people just to look at putting my name in the hat for that ward seat. And consequently, I ended up applying for it. I ended up getting selected for it. So I got on the city council. That was in 2011. I ran in 2012. Got elected onto that. Ran again 2014. Won that election. And then in 2018, of course, it was the mayor's race. Right. And Mayor Slavic at that time had decided not to run for a fourth term. She had been on the council for 20 years, 12 as mayor, and that's enough. That was plenty, she thought. So, and I just decided at that point, Plymouth had been operating so long and so great. And it was so financially strong. I just wanted to make absolutely sure we stayed on that path. So I ran for mayor. That was the last time I was on your show, and here I am.
So we're glad to welcome you back again.
Yeah, thank you.
And then I asked you to think about what issues generate the most questions to you about the city of Plymouth.
You know, and that was really interesting. As I was going door knocking during my campaign, the questions I were asked were all dependent upon where I was in Plymouth. And so when I was in the northwest part of Plymouth, you know, it was all about County Road 47 and getting that redeveloped and widened and having trails on there. So that was the issue. If I was on the eastern side of Plymouth, everyone wanted to know what was going on with the Four Seasons Mall. So I wouldn't say there was an issue citywide that encompassed everything. It's more relative to where people lived in the neighborhoods that they were in, that they may have had concerns or issues about. So,
well, we talked ahead of time about a number of issues, and one of the ones I thought we'd start with is that your city center area which we'll describe in a minute. You're
Yep.
looking at envisioning it or calling it City Center 2.0.
Right.
I think we have to start out by saying where this area is first.
Sure. And if you look at City Center 2 is just encompasses like City Hall.
Okay.
And if you go west and kind of north from there, it encompasses Cub Foods, the Man Movie Theater, the library,
Oh, right.
Lifetime Fitness
Right.
is there, the ice rink is there. And so there's a lot of retail and
Right.
offices that are kind of in that area. And so really, City Center was developed over 20 years ago.
Right.
And the original vision of that was they wanted to create a central hub for Plymouth, where people would come and they would do their shopping or entertainment, but they'd be able to park and they'd be able to walk
Right.
within the complex of what they. But what happened was it was developed parcel by parcel,
Oh, sure.
without kind of a master plan
Right.
of how that would work.
Right.
And so consequently, it really got developed without any walkability into it, integrated into that. And so well, this is all part about looking at that. We have such great amenities. Our
Oh,
Hildy
yeah.
Performance Center, the park
Right.
is right there.
Right.
And all the other amenities I just mentioned are right there. So how do we reimagine what City Center could look like if we did create walkability?
Right.
And what would we need to bring in there that's different than there is today? So we've hired 2 different consultants to do this and to help us with that.
Right.
One is exactly doing that part I talked about, kind of reimagining how would that look? How would that
right.
feel that you could create that kind of master plan and integrate it into something that's
Right.
already been developed.
Yeah, how to kind of make the
Right.
two work together.
Right. And then the other thing kind of encompasses what I heard when I was door knocking and campaigning, because people would say, you know, Plymouth really doesn't have a downtown.
Right.
We have a city center, but it's not perceived as a downtown for Plymouth. And people, the other thing people say is we don't have any restaurants in Plymouth, which is absolutely correct. And the thing that we've talked to developers, if you're going to have restaurants in Plymouth, you have to have density. And
Right.
we're not talking just peripheral density, we're
Right.
talking concentrated density.
Right.
So density in such that people will be able to walk to the restaurant
Right.
and not have to drive to the restaurant to support that business. And so that's the other thing we're looking at is a housing component, if that makes sense, to come into a city center. And so we're reaching out. One consultant is in charge of engagement
Okay.
with our community, because we never want to do anything unless we're confident our residents are behind it and supportive of it.
Right.
And so they're going to be reaching out later this spring and early summer just to get feedback and try and get a sense from the community if this is something that they think would be a good idea. I've heard it on the campaign trail and the door knocking,
Sure.
but we want to confirm that,
Oh, definitely.
and not just like I hear ancillary stories out there.
Yeah.
Out there, but it's true. I mean, even we had Jake's close recently,
Right. That's what you
and
said.
that's a loss of a restaurant to the city. And we want to make sure, what can we do as far as the city to encourage development and having restaurants? And I think there's real desire not just to have the bar and grill,
Oh, right.
but also have a little bit nicer restaurant that people can go to as well. So, what are the things we need to do to help encourage that and bring that kind of availability into
Right.
Plymouth?
Yeah, and then the ideas of things that people want to get involved in keep changing over the years, so you have to keep up to date with that.
Right. Yep. Yeah, you have to be relevant
Right.
based on what people want. And right now, people want walkability.
Ah,
They want to be able to, even if they don't walk to work, they want to be able to come home and have the option to be able to walk to without getting back in their car again. So if you look at some of these developments that have happened in the suburbs,
right.
roughly 60% of the people who rent those apartments are baby boomers.
Right,
that
right.
don't want the home,
Yeah.
don't want a homeowners association, they just want to rent.
Right.
And then the other 40% are really like the millennial population that doesn't want to stay in the North Loop anymore.
Yep.
Their kids are getting into school, so they're looking at options
Oh,
to
yeah.
come out in the suburbs for
Yep.
better school
Right.
districts. And that makes up the other 40% of who rents these places. So it's an interesting dynamic. If we want to attract a younger population to come in and move
Right.
into our city, and that'll eventually buy homes in our city, we have to look at that as a consideration.
Oh, right. There's lots of details that need looking
sure.
in.
Yep.
And that's where the consultants can help you with what are some of the changes other places either are undergoing or have recently undergone and have been something people like, something people enjoy.
We don't need to invent the wheel ourselves. We
No,
just need to see
right.
what's worked and what hasn't worked in other communities.
So the next point would be getting some ideas that you'll present to the public?
The consulting firm will do different levels of engagements.
Okay.
They might do an ice cream thing to catch people. It's really people that are utilizing City Center and coming in to go to Cub, to go to the Mann Theater, to engage them. Like, what would you think if this was done differently? And getting their feedback and just putting that all together so they can prepare a report for the council.
Sure, so we'll tell people, be prepared for that and be thinking about it so that you have where you're coming from and what you'd really like to see.
Yeah, we're waiting till spring and early summer to do that because in wintertime, people aren't walking around City Center very much.
Or pausing
or like
very
they want
long.
to get out of their cars, in and back in their cars again.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's kind of an interesting thing we'll have to keep on top of over the next year or two.
Yep, and we'll see how that progresses.
Yeah, it takes time to do something like that and come to a point where you are actually building something, but you've taken the time so you know you're doing the right thing.
Right, that's what we want to do.
And then one of the things that's just barely starting is that they're putting in bus rapid transit corridors in different places. And some people have thoughts of doing this on Highway 55.
So really, I looked at Metropolitan Council's 2040 map of transit corridors.
Right.
And if you look at that map, basically everything north of the city, all the way to the east, all the way to the south, to the southwest where like they're doing the southwest light rail line, has transit corridors defined in it.
Already.
Already.
Yeah.
But if you looked at Plymouth doesn't have anything with a transit corridor designated for it. And so we looked and said, what does that mean to the future of Plymouth if we're not included in a transit corridor?
Right.
And so we started looking at what would Highway 55 look like if Highway 55 was a transit corridor that would connect up with the Botno line that's being developed, connect in with the rest of the transit system that would allow people access to get out to Plymouth. Now there's two things. There's over 60,000 jobs in Plymouth.
Yeah, I've read that somewhere.
Yes.
How many companies you have.
Yep, we have a lot of companies. And Plymouth is the fourth largest city in terms of GDP.
Ooh.
People don't realize that because we don't have retail, but we have so much commercial and industrial in Plymouth, which means jobs.
Oh, definitely.
And good paying jobs.
Yeah, good jobs.
Right. And to support those businesses, they need to have people that can access those jobs and those good paying jobs that maybe are more transit dependent.
Yep.
Maybe they have one car, or they need a backup in case something happens with their car to be able to get to work. So it's really primarily about connecting people and jobs together so people have access to those jobs. But secondarily, it's also for the residents of Plymouth and beyond, Golden Valley, Medina,
certainly.
all along where that BRT, that bus rapid transit line would go, because what bus rapid transit is all-day bus service from early in the morning till late at night, and it runs every 15 minutes.
Right.
And so if you have predictable transit that you know you can go to work, stay for a Twins game, have a beer afterwards if you want, and still get on the bus and get back out to your home, that's a great option for residents to have.
Definitely.
And to know that's there. And Bus Rapid is different because they're fitted so that as they come up on the stoplights, we all know how many stoplights are on Highway 55. They change the stoplights just like police cars do. So they're able to go through from stop to stop in a more rapid fashion. And so really, it's just the beginning stages of putting the political will of this together to get something started. And so Plymouth has signed on to exploring this. Golden Valley has signed into exploring this, and so those are the two main cities that are trying to create this momentum. And what the next step is we need to have an engineering study done.
Right.
In terms of understanding the viability of that corridor and what the cost would be. And so we're just trying to see, right now, get an idea of how much that study would cost, and then just figuring out, all right, how do we get that done? How do we pay for it? How do we move that along to the next phase? And then beyond that, it's just like, all right, how do you get into the funding, the line for funding and everything else? But first step at a time.
Oh, right.
Yep.
No, I could see where that would be very handy. And even for other cities not close by, you might want to drive over there, get on that bus, not deal with parking and
Right, you
all
might
of
want to
that.
drive, be in one of our park and rides.
right.
And I think the big thing is especially millennials that are coming up, they don't want to drive.
Right.
They want to have access to their phones. They want to do that on their drive. They don't want to have to be stuck in traffic, and just they want to have transit available to them.
So people can kind of watch as this progresses, but right now it's starting to just gather information.
Right. Yep.
So if anybody's interested in that, they can check with City Hall and follow that along.
That's right.
Because you have the availability on your website to sign up for email notices,
email
notifications.
alerts.
So if any of these issues that we're talking about, people could go on the website, sign up for email alerts on topics that they're concerned about.
Right. And when there's update, they'll get an email.
They'll know what's happening on it.
Yep.
Now, the Hollydale Golf Course, which is in Plymouth, is looking to make some changes. Maybe you can give us a little history building up to possible changes that are being looked at.
Sure. So Hollydale's been a golf course since the 60s.
Right.
So over 50 years, it's been just a golf course. Before that, it was farmland.
Right.
And so this is a fairly significant change. The developer has that property under contract, and now they're going through the process of looking at developing that. So when we have a development that's over 250 homes in size, they're required by state law to have what's called an environmental assessment worksheet done.
Okay.
And so the process has been, at this point, getting the environmental worksheet, or an EAW, completed, and then there has to be out there for public input. So that public input has ended by now. And it went through planning the other week.
Okay.
And it'll be in front of the council, the EAW, and a sketch plan review. So the sketch plan review means is that the developer right now has 319 homes on roughly 158 acres of land. And it's to get feedback from the planning commission, and then it's feedback to get from council as to what we think about that. What do we think about the density within that? What do we think about the street layout within that?
Right.
Before they spend a bunch of money developing a preliminary plat and making an application, they want some informal feedback from the city, right? And so we have not received an application yet.
Okay.
Which means it's like we can't say anything other than the things that are being put in front of us, right? So the next step, the developer, once it goes through the city council, assuming it does go through the council, the council could all say it wants an environmental impact something worksheet, but that rarely has ever happened where a city has asked for that to happen. So if it goes to the next step, that's when the developer would actually make an application with the city. That application would include an amendment to the city's comprehensive plan and also a zoning change. And that's really when we start talking, at that point in time, in that future event is when we actually start talking about the land use and what an appropriate land use is. And so I think that's one of the concerns. Everyone wants to jump right away and talk about land use.
And it's not to that point yet.
And we don't have an application, so we can't talk about land use at this point. So,
but somebody has bought the property or has
it under contract.
Under contract.
Under contract.
They've got that under contract, so it's like the very beginning stage.
Right. Yep. So it's very early on. People always want to jump to the end.
Right, right.
But there's a process, and we need to follow the process and work through
Well,
that.
and the process then makes sure that all the different details are handled and you don't forget something.
Oh, yeah, I mean, this is very defined process
Yeah.
that the city has.
And
absolutely.
by law, you have to follow it too, right?
Right. And by law, we can't give an opinion for something until we have that public
Oh, right,
process.
right.
And we can't give an opinion on something when we haven't even received the application for something yet.
So I'm sure
Well,
a lot of people are getting ready to be involved or
Oh, they already are involved. Trust me,
or have
they
already
are involved.
contacted
Yeah.
you and other city council
Yes,
people,
I've
right?
gotten lots of emails on
Yeah.
this subject.
Yeah, I think they had something in the paper just the other day,
Yeah,
or
yep,
the local paper.
right. And the Sun Sailor, it's been there.
Yep.
Right. And it's very understandable. I understand the local residents there that are in that neighborhood or may have homes on the neighborhood.
Right.
You know, they don't want to lose that golf course
Oh,
they've
right,
had.
right.
They would love nothing better than for it to stay a golf course or open space, because that's what they've always had.
Oh, it's what you know.
And I absolutely understand their concern with
Right,
traffic.
right.
And how much traffic's going to bring in and out. It's not an easy site for traffic to get in and out of. There's only two ways they get the cars in and out of that development. So trust me, I get the
Right.
concerns they have. So it's can you get to a place where something makes sense?
Now, this might be an area where it would be good to get notifications if you're really concerned about it at this point.
Yeah, and you can go to the city website.
Because there's lots
right.
and lots of steps yet to come.
Right, yep. Yeah, there certainly are.
Well,
We're just kind of at the beginning stages of this from the city standpoint. So,
and so you're getting a range of reactions at this point.
you know, most of the reactions are from the neighborhood,
Uh-huh.
you know, because they're the most that are going to be directly impacted.
Sure.
But I also get comments from other people that have a different viewpoint.
Sure.
Because they don't live in the neighborhood, they don't live on the
Oh,
golf
right,
course.
right.
They don't want the city using taxpayer money to do anything with
Yeah,
that site.
yeah.
And so it's just like you would expect.
Right.
If my home's on the golf course, yeah, I'd want the city to
right.
buy, the golf
Right,
course,
right.
right? And keep it that way. If I live in southeast Plymouth and I'm nowhere near the golf course, like why would I want my
Yeah,
tax money to go
Right.
for the city to buy that golf course?
So, and that kind of process does need lots of stages where you get input, so people have at least, they've been heard.
Right,
You might not always get what you want, but at least you know that you've been heard
Right.
and what you brought up has been considered.
right, yep, absolutely,
Would be an important part of it.
right, yep, it always is.
Right. You don't have a lot of development going on currently, I think?
There is always been a lot of development going on. We've had nonstop development going on for years now. I can't remember if it's 300 some new homes we've been adding a year, something probably
Oh,
in
yeah,
that
that's a lot.
magnitude.
Right.
Yeah, but Plymouth is going to be pretty close to fully built out in
Right.
4 years.
Right.
And
Getting
so
there.
we're getting close to where we're going to be ending that cycle. And so, you know, that's why it's important to just kind of look to see what's next. How do
Right.
we keep the city vibrant? How do we keep the city's tax base growing? What are the things we can do that we don't rest on our laurels, so to
right,
speak?
right.
Right.
Keep up with the changes in society.
Right, and I like to think we mentioned before, just stay relevant in our community.
Right, is important. So are there any commercial or business projects that are coming up in the future that you know of now?
You know, in terms of the commercial projects,
Right.
Plymouth is pretty well built out.
Okay.
There's not green space for people to build or
Bigger
expand on
kinds
or
of
whatnot,
things.
right. And yet, our biggest challenge is we have businesses in Plymouth that are growing.
Right,
And so if they don't have the ability to grow within their current
Right.
footprint, you know, then they're going to be looking at where else they can go to
right,
grow.
right. you
And so
wanna-
that's a challenge for us
Oh, yeah,
to try and help them and figure out how do we help them grow.
Right.
What's the business model that they have in terms of inventory warehousing? What are the things that they could look at and do to make better use? We have a lot of med tech, med device. In
Oh,
fact,
right.
Plymouth has the highest med tech, med device concentration in anywhere in the whole country.
Wow, I didn't know that. I know
Right.
that you had a lot of health
Yep.
and medical things,
Yep,
but
there
that's
are.
a lot.
There is. There's a ton
Yeah.
in Plymouth. And so how do we help that industry so it can continue to flourish in
Right.
Plymouth? You know, and there are a lot of really good paying jobs, you know, in those companies. So we want to make sure they stay in Plymouth. The other thing around redevelopment is just different sites that developers may be considering that maybe back in the day they had their best use and someone put something there.
Yeah.
But today it's not the best use of that
Right,
property.
Right.
So like the Dundee Nursery site
Right.
that's being sold, and a developer's looking at that for an apartment building, and we have to, from an access standpoint, does that make sense? MnDOT will weigh into that from a Highway 55 standpoint.
Right.
But we have to look at these things and say, all right, as Plymouth finishes developing out, what are other projects that would make sense for us to continue to grow and be vital
Now, you don't
and
want to be
energetic.
static. You want to
Right.
be on the, maybe not the cutting edge, but on the
Right.
forward movement.
Right, right. We don't want explosive growth.
No.
No.
That's no fun either. Are there any new businesses that have recently come to Plymouth?
You know, not that I can think of
Okay.
right offhand. You always have people that are maybe opening up a new retail shop
Uh-huh.
and coming into Plymouth, but most of it's just expansion.
Right.
Just a lot of expansion right now.
And then you're looking to encourage restaurants,
Yes.
from what we
yeah,
said before. Right.
That's right.
And then, now we've got, well, not a lot of time, but one way for people to get involved is on the different commissions that Plymouth has,
Yep.
that you need volunteers to run those.
Yep.
What kinds of positions, what kinds of commissions are there?
Yeah, and that's really the way I got involved with the city is like I started on the transit committee. And right now we have the planning commissions out there. We have our Plymouth Recreation, Park and Recreation committees out there. We have Environmental Quality Committee. And so we have some of these different committees. And every year in like October,
Right.
we advertise that people are interested and would like to serve on these
Right.
committees to fill out an application and submit it. And then we have that open up through, I believe it's October into November. And then the city council will actually look at the vacancies that are coming up on
Right.
those committees or commissions and then say, all right, you know, we need to replace. And so then we'll interview, we'll pare it down based on the applications received, and we'll see who we want to interview for those spots. And it's a great way to give back and get involved in the city.
Right.
Yeah. Right.
So we'll tell people, follow through on that. Find a place that you can get involved. Well, I want to thank you very much
All right.
for
Yeah,
sharing,
thank you, Juanita.
sharing your time and your expertise with our audience out there. We'll ask you to tune in next week for part 2 on Plymouth's issues. We're glad you've been with us, and we'll see you next week. Bye.